This is Siegel's final position. He started on the ridge line way back there, over to the left, and he started firing down into the Confederate encampments in a stubble field just on the other side of that fence. His second position, he passed that one on the way through. Now they were firing. They had no idea what they were shooting at or how many rounds they were putting down range. They were just putting stuff down range. So back in there was Price's headquarters, and his logistics train was back in there too. But his logistics train, the after-action reports say that it caught fire. Somehow it caught fire. We don't know if there were Confederate infiltrators or if it was an accident or if the guys on the hill or the guys on the second position fired into there, because they weren't really aiming. They were just kind of firing. So as Siegel's brigade starts moving their way, they crossed the creek, came down the hill, set up their second position, and they're firing into this area up in here. He thinks he's making great progress because they're routing the Confederate forces, which are the Missouri Home Guard, routing them out of their encampments because they're not regulars, right? They had almost no experience. These guys are, how long have they been in the military? Maybe 2 months? So they got 2 months of experience. They don't have weapons. They're poorly supplied. Their logistics is terrible. And they got two commanders that are at odds each other about what they should do and what the strategy should be. So they're making really great progress until he gets up here and he sets up his positions astride the road. Now, they didn't unlimber the guns. He left one battalion in the marching position in the center, and on both sides of that one there were a loose conglomeration of other soldiers in the other two parts of the regiment or the brigade that he had that were there. Now, if you turn around and look behind you, you see that there is sloping terrain downward to what is probably a creek down there, right? In the summertime, you can't see down that hill because the underbrush has grown up. Now remember, this is a little bit different than it was. There weren't as many trees around here. The field was more wide open. But from down below down there, that's where McCulloch's counterattack came through when the brigade of Sigel was stationed here on the road with their weapons turned downrange in a parallel, going to shoot down the hill, but they came up from this side. And they didn't know if they were first Iowa, second Iowa. What was it, first Iowa?
First Iowa.
First Iowa, because they had gray uniforms on. They had no, even when he came down here, before they came down, Sigel and Lyons and their entire staff did not talk about close recognition, far recognition, because they didn't know that it existed. They never thought that far ahead. The orders process that we follow now in the military is significantly more detailed, even down to the platoon and team level. So we would know where we're going, what we're going to do. If somebody leaves the camp, the OP or the LP, listening post, outpost, or the CP, the command post, there's a 5-point contingency plan that is given to who's ever left behind, the next person, if the leader goes out on a recon. All that stuff is taken care of. These guys know. So their orders process was really shoddy. And the main man, Sigel, here, he got promoted because he's the guy that was a superintendent of the school board and got his school board? Yeah, he was superintendent of St. Louis schools. That's how he got the position as a brigade commander. Now, he did raise a lot. In his defense, he did raise a lot of, brought a lot of forces in, too, German forces in. And after this one, you know, he went to Pea Ridge and did well there. Got his promotion there, and then he went as a major general and went and fought at the Second Bull Run, and that was just broken, right? But here, so here's where the final position was. One thing that he did do is he concentrated the artillery in a line instead of staggering them. But he had his artillery in close support right up front, because here you couldn't shoot over the top. Artillery hadn't really changed yet to indirect fire. It was indirect fire, but it was long distance, straight fire. Now, Lee was the one that changed that predominantly on the third day of Gettysburg when they did that gigantic artillery barrage. This is where his position was. So he's got a brigade of people here. They've got no scouts down this way. They've got one small cavalry detachment to his right and his left. He's naked. And they've got all these guys that he just routed off the battlefield, and they're ha-ha-ha laughing it up. And they're coming along here, but they're not collecting the prisoners, and they're not controlling them. They're filtering down this way, so when they filter down through the woods, away from the Union Army, what do they know? Strength, disposition, location. you know, what they are. They speak this funny language. They sound German. So they knew they were dealing with foreign nationals. So could they all understand English? Maybe, who knows? So when they popped up over the hill on him, and McCulloch, unleashed hell on the Union forces right here because it was an artillery barrage and it was direct fire, shoulder-fired weapons. So these weren't rough puffs. These were, you know, Arkansinian and Confederate forces. So they didn't just have shotguns and the other stuff like Price's guys did going up on the hill. They pretty much made toast out of this, and the entire brigade took off that direction. There's a cornfield over here. Sigel was found in the cornfield, but he was the first guy back in Springfield. The rest of the brigade was scattered, combat ineffective in about 10 minutes. He did not have contact with Lyons up on the hill. Right there. Not 1,000 meters away, straight line distance. They didn't have this, semaphore or wigwag. They didn't have that yet. That came along a little bit later in the war. They didn't have wire. They didn't have radios. They tried runners, but if the runners go that way, guess what? They have to find their way all the way around the Confederate forces and the Confederate lines to try to get back to the Union Army and the Union the lines. But are they going to make it? Who knows?
It's almost like you were with us at our last stop. Because that's exactly the conversation we had.
And even if they arrive, how old is the information?
The information is of no value.
It's
Limited
of no value
because of its age.
Yeah.
because
right?
everything is moving so fast.
Yeah.
When that information arrives, it's already out of date.
So that's a good thing about, so we look at the situation in any modern combat environment, right? Communication is key to everything. And in the absence of orders,
You're just making Randy's head
Stop
swell.
it. Stop it.
in the absence of orders, do something. Right, wrong, or indifferent, do something. You have to do something, right?
That's what we said too.
Don't just sit on the road with the guns and wait for somebody to come and tear you up with security out, right? He had cavalry with him. Why did he put them out? We don't know. I mean, maybe they were tired from marching all the night. Now remember, this is late in the day of like 1300, roughly, when they were out here. So the guy that was from Kansas that came across the field, Sharp's field out there, remember they did all this on foot. We're driving it. And they were moving on foot, and it was hot as blazes out there, right? They're wearing wool. They don't have much water. Their logistics sucks, right? But everybody was pretty much used to hard times. The stuff that we've covered in a short period of time, these guys did it in the same amount of time, but they did it on foot.
Yeah.
So you got to remember that. That's why, and my knees suck. So, you know, I didn't even make the last stop with you. So that's, you know, here I am, old man driving around in a silver car, and I make it up here and talk about what a schmuck this Sigel was. He actually did a pretty good job up until right here. Up until right here when he had his forces in a little clump, and then no close recognition, no far recognition. They just got their butts kicked, and they all took off in different directions. They straggled all the way back to Springfield, and it took them all night to get back there. One artillery piece did make it back, but the Confederates tried to grab it, but they couldn't get it. So I think one piece of artillery on batteries that he had 6 guns in his battery. One of them made it back to Springfield.
So Kent, when you talk about him being the first one back, what did he do when he got back?
I never found out.
He went to bed.
He didn't really bed. He was a tired boy.
He's smart.
Up all night long. And leadership is a hard thing. Leadership is a hard thing. That's why they don't make it. That's why they don't let everybody do it. Right? So this is a perfect example of why the leadership in current military, specifically in the United States military, why we do the things we do and why we act the way we act. I mean, there's no chance for anything like this to happen again, right? I don't know. We might find out here pretty shortly. You put a bunch of light fighters in someplace where they don't belong, and who knows what's going to happen, right? Any questions?
Which way are those guns facing? Are they pretty much straight north? Trying to orient myself.
I don't have a compass. Let me see. Wait a second.
I feel like we're...
Hour hand at the sun, half between the hour hand and south. That's south. That's north.
Okay.
So they're kind of like northeast,
Okay.
like Doug said. Should have listened to him the first time. You know the rule about watches? Okay, so if you're in the northern hemisphere and you don't know what direction north is, right? You point the hour hand of your watch at the sun. Halfway between the hour hand and the 12 is south. So that way south, just doing about face, that way is north. Now, if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's exactly the opposite. But we're not in the southern hemisphere. So
What if you have a digital watch?
carry compass. Or you can use your shadow. Or you can use your shadow stick method. Okay. So you put a stick in the ground, and then you put a stone where the shadow is now, and you wait about 30 minutes, and you put the second spot, that line you draw is an east-west line.
So the Confederates didn't pursue, though, really? They kind of stopped here, I would guess.
Kind of. I mean, there were
Yeah,
Union guys scattered all over the place. They were
Union
chasing
guys all over the place.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were all. I mean, literally, they were all the way back there, all the way up the wire road. I don't know how they got through the Confederate lines, to be honest with you, unless they went around.
Well, they
one
went.
way or the
They
other.
went way back around.
Way back around where the route of
the
march
way they
was.
came. Yeah.
So they went back the same way they came in. Pretty stupid. Never used the same road twice. Rogers Rangers, you guys ever heard of them?
Yep.
First rule of Rogers Rangers: don't forget nothing. What's the second rule? I don't remember.
Yeah, exactly.
Couple points. I can't emphasize enough what he said about security and surprise. Why there's not a cavalry detachment down Wire Road, half mile or so, I have no idea. Unbelievable that they're sitting here and there's nothing, there's no scouts or anything out in front.
When you know you can't see.
Well, he sent one. He sent one in his defense. He sent one LPOP out.
Well,
And that was the guy that tried to kill McCulloch and he got shot.
well, he sent the guy out after he saw troops marching his way. That's too late. That's way too late.
Yeah, kind of late there. You don't have any.
And Sigel made the excuse that the first Iowa was in gray uniforms. He thought it was the first Iowa. I think I'm going to write an article about this one time. There's no documentary evidence at the time that said the first Iowa was in gray uniforms or that Sigel mistook them. Sigel never says. Sigel makes 2 after-action reports and never ever mentions anything about the first Iowa being in gray and him mistaking it. That comes from an article from Century Magazine, which developed in the Battles and Leaders of the Civil War 20 years after the battle, and he mentions it twice. He's making it up. And the fact, not only is he making it up, the first Iowa was not in gray. Only about 6 of their 10 companies were ever in gray. They were outfitted by their hometowns, and of those 6, their uniforms had fallen apart long before they got to Springfield, and they were wearing mostly civilian clothes and bits and pieces of uniform. But he's lying. It was to cover up his lack of security.
That's right. Poor planning.
And if you
Prior
want to,
planning precludes poor performance.
prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
Well, I didn't want to say that. Yeah,
I suggest you go to the road and look down the road and see. And these trees wouldn't have been here.
yeah, this is pretty much gone. But there was underbrush that was here, so you wouldn't really have seen them. But these guys are asleep at the switch here.
Yeah.
So everything in this battle, to me, compared to other battles, seems to move much more quickly. You mentioned it; things are happening quickly.
Yeah, they did. They're pretty quick.
It always seems like it always takes a minute to get troops moved up, and especially green troops. And yet we have a lot of green troops on both sides here. Yet things did happen quickly. Does this feel like
They didn't know any better.
Does the timing of this battle all took
Hasty.
place in the morning?
Hasty,
Really?
maybe, is the word you're trying to look for. It's very hasty. Everything's very hasty.
Does it
You
just
know.
feel like it all starts and is over? Is it because both armies were actually prepared to attack?
No, I think that's because they're both very green.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Confederate forces under McCulloch, they weren't as green as everybody else, and the second infantry, or second was the detachments from Leavenworth, they were seasoned, so they were up in the fight up there, but they weren't in. They were on one side of the fight. They weren't completely outgunned like everybody else was. But the artillery won the engagement up on Bloody Hill. I mean, it hands down. If those batteries had not been there firing downhill in depressed positions, Union forces would not have been able to hold that ground. But hasty, that's right. Everything hasty, very hastily done, very in a rush. You never got time to do it right once, but you can always do it twice. Okay, that's it.
Sigel was even in a hurry up to this point.
Oh, he wanted to be the conquering hero. He was going to roll up the Confederate spear and meet up with
And yet he just
Lion on
stopped.
top of the hill, and he just stood right there and got his Okoli kicked all over the battlefield because he wouldn't put any security out. Unbelievable. Okay, so